Hotel del Coronado, Coronado, California. A Tuesday morning in February 1922, a little after 9. Margaret Ellison, 38, from Oak Park, Illinois, wife of a wholesale hardware man, stands in the Illinois Oak lobby in a gray wool traveling suit she has not been able to change out of for 3 days. She and her husband left Chicago on the Santa Fe on Saturday. It is now Tuesday. Beside her are 4 pieces of luggage, and inside the smallest is a lighter dress she has kept folded since Kansas, because her sister wrote that at the Del you dressed for the dining room even at midday. She has not seen the ocean yet. She has been inside the building 90 seconds. What she came almost a week across the country to do has not started, and already the lobby, its dark oak, its height, its quiet, is telling her that it will require something of her. Not money, she has paid. Something else. To understand what the Del was going to ask of Margaret Ellison, you first have to understand why it took her the better part of a week to get here, and why that week is the reason the hotel existed in the form it did. The Santa Fe ran from Chicago to Los Angeles, and in the 1920s even the fastest named trains took the better part of 2 days. The Grand Canyon Limited averaged about 51 hours westbound, and that was before you changed and ran down the coast to San Diego, then took the ferry across the bay to Coronado. A Midwestern family gave up close to a week each way. You did not do that for a weekend. You came for a season, a month, or at the very least a fortnight, because the journey itself demanded that the stay be long enough to be worth it. The hotel was built in 1888 by 2 men who had never run one, Elisha Babcock Jr. of Evansville, Indiana, and Hampton L. Story of Chicago. They bought the whole peninsula, 4,100 acres for $110,000, and raised a wooden Victorian palace on empty sand, framed in Douglas fir, clad in California redwood, floored in the lobby with Illinois white oak. When it opened, rooms started at about $2.50 a day, and, per the hotel's own records, that price included 3 meals a day under the American plan. Your room and your dining came as one. That is the first thing the Del organized. Not a bed near the water. A way of living, for a set number of days, that the ordinary year had no room for. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of the American beach hotel between 1920 and 1980, the lobby, the dining room, the pool terrace, the Saturday night ballroom, the staff who knew which table was yours before you sat down, and what each of these things meant for the specific people who organized their year-around being in them. Not nostalgia for old swimming pools. The documented social reality of an institution that gave some Americans a dining room captain who knew their name, and left other Americans with a different map entirely. The Del's American plan gave its guests a dining room where being there was itself the occasion, something the standardized room a generation later was never built to provide. And if you stayed in these hotels, or your family did, put it in the comments. Did your family ride the rails for days to reach a beach hotel, and what did they pack for the dining room? Next time we open the doors of the Roney Plaza in Miami Beach. Back to the lobby. The room Margaret changed her dress for is the one now called the Crown Room. It measured 160 feet by 60, its Oregon sugar pine ceiling arching 33 feet overhead, pegged together with wood, no nails, no interior columns, and it could seat around 1,000 people. Hanging in it were crown-shaped chandeliers designed, around 1911, by L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, who stayed at the Del for months at a stretch between 1904 and 1917 and there wrote 3 of his Oz books, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, The Road to Oz, and The Emerald City of Oz. And in this room, at 10 o'clock on the evening of Wednesday, April 7, 1920, the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VIII, was honored at a reception after stepping off the battlecruiser Renown, the hotel's own account records filet mignon and baked Alaska, and 1,000 guests dancing afterward in the ballroom. A local legend says he first met Wallace Spencer, then a Navy officer's wife living a block away, that very night. It is not true. In her 1956 memoir The Heart Has Its Reasons, Wallace herself wrote that she met Chaplin and Barrymore in California but not, as one popular story has it, the Prince of Wales. The romance is the story people tell. The documented fact is a naval wife who probably was not even at the gala, and a dining room built so that being in it was the event. Here is the part this channel will not skip. The guests who filled the Crown Room came from the Midwest, the East Coast, and Europe, many arriving with their own servants. In practice the clientele was white and prosperous. And the town the hotel had conjured was, by design, closed. County property records show that Coronado, like La Jolla, Point Loma, and much of the San Diego coast, carried racially restrictive covenants barring Black, Chinese, Japanese, and Jewish people from owning or occupying homes except as servants. By the late 1920s, those covenants had begun to erase Coronado's Black community. The Coronado Historical Association's 2024 exhibit, An Island Looks Back, documented that a Black population present since the 1880s shrank almost to nothing by the early 1940s. Now, about the hotel's own front desk, honesty requires a specific admission. The documentary record is silent. No surviving document states that the Hotel del Coronado turned Black or Jewish guests away, and none states that it welcomed them. What is documented is the world built around it, and that world was engineered to keep certain people out. To sit in that dining room, you did not only need the fare and the dress. You needed to belong to the category the town's deeds had drawn a line around. The Del was raised in a single year, 1887, with a peak of some 2,000 workers, and, as the Coronado Historical Association documents, a considerable share of that labor was provided by Chinese immigrants brought south from San Francisco and Oakland, paid a reported $2 a day, and openly disparaged even as they built the largest resort in the country. This in the years just after the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. 2 formerly enslaved men are woven into the hotel's very first day. Solomon Johnson, born into slavery in Tennessee in 1847, was Babcock's coachman through the building years. And Gustavus Gus Thompson, born into slavery in Kentucky in 1859, was hired by Babcock as family coachman in 1887 and, in January 1888, carried the very first guests to the Hotel del Coronado in the Babcock carriage. The men who opened the doors of the palace were among the people the palace would not accommodate. And for a Black family from Chicago's South Side who wanted the same February sun, the map was entirely different. They could not book the Delaware. What they had was the Negro Motorist Green Book, published from 1936 to 1966, and in San Diego it pointed to the Douglas Hotel at 2nd and Market, the only place of quality lodging and entertainment for Black visitors during a period of intense segregation, home to the Creole Palace, billed as the Harlem of the West, where Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, and Duke Ellington played. Same ocean. Everything on the way to it, different. Step back to the daytime world, because the Del was never only its dining room. Below the veranda ran a mile of surf, and surf bathing was the reason the health resort brochures existed. Just south stood the Plunge, a bathhouse whose saltwater tanks a San Diego paper in 1892 called the finest and most elegant saltwater swimming tanks in California, with hot and cold saltwater tub baths for 50 cents, because immersing yourself in seawater was thought to be strengthening. And from 1900 to 1939 the middle class had its own foothold, Tent City, John Spreckles' grid of furnished tents and cottages just down the sand, where for around $4.50 a week a family could have the same beach the Del's guests had. Spreckles, the sugar heir who bought control of the company by the early 1890s and held it for 6 decades, even ran a beach school from 1913 for the children of guests who stayed for months. Then the 20th century pressed in. San Diego became a Navy town, and in the 1940s the Del became a Navy town's hotel. During World War II, while other San Diego hotels were requisitioned as barracks and hospitals, the Del kept operating as a business even as it housed pilots training at North Island and their families. The surf was still the surf. But the wicker-rocker world of the long winter season was quietly ending. For as long as the season lasted, the Del ran on people, not systems. Under the American plan the dining room was the hinge of the day, and it turned on a dining room captain who knew which table was yours, waiters in white jackets who learned that the family from Oak Park liked the corner by the window, and a staff whose whole craft was recognition. That is the thing worth naming from the inside. What Margaret Ellison was buying with her week on the Santa Fe was not a view. It was being known for 14 days, greeted, seated, remembered, in a way the ordinary year in Oak Park did not offer a wholesale hardware man's wife. The plunge attendant, the poolman, the social director who organized the dances and the children's maypole ceremony, they were the institution. The room and the ocean were the setting, the recognition was the product. And a product made of people is expensive, and slow, and impossible to standardize. Which is precisely why, when the standardized hotel arrived, the recognition was the first thing it could not carry, and the last thing its guests would think to miss, until it was gone. Before you can understand why the Grand Beach Hotel ended, you need to understand what a hotel was allowed to be after 1952. On August 1st of that year, Kemmons Wilson opened the first Holiday Inn in Memphis. His idea was standardization, a clean, predictable room, air conditioning, a television, a telephone, a pool, free ice, children-free, identical whether you stopped in Topeka or Tallahassee. There was no dining room captain, no social director, no American plan, no dressing for a midday meal. There was a room, and it was the same room everywhere, and that sameness was the whole promise. The Del's premise had been the opposite. The journey is long, so the stay is long, so the hotel must be a world. Holiday Inn's premise was that the journey is short and frequent, so the room need only be reliable. Then the second force arrived overhead. Cheap jet travel put the ocean itself within a few hours. By 1970 a family could fly to Hawaii for about $125 each way. The California family that had once surrendered a week to the Santa Fe for the Del could now be in Honolulu or Mexico by afternoon. The long season that had required a hotel to be a world simply dissolved. Look at what happened to the others, because it makes the Del's survival legible. The Hotel Del Monte in Monterey, the great Victorian seaside resort opened in 1880, was leased to the Navy in 1942 and sold to it outright in 1947. It never reopened as a resort, becoming the Naval Postgraduate School. Coronado's own tent city, the affordable half of the Del's world, closed in 1939 to make way for the Silver Strand Highway. And the Del itself nearly went the same way. In 1948, after nearly 60 years, the Spreckels family sold it for a reported $2 million, and the property passed through a string of owners. In 1960 the San Diego millionaire John Alessio bought the deteriorating hotel and spent some $2 million redecorating. Then, in 1963, Larry Lawrence bought it, and his first plan was to tear the wooden palace down and develop the land. He changed his mind. Over the following years he poured a reported $150 million into it, doubling the hotel to some 700 rooms by adding 2 7-story ocean towers in the 1970s, plus a convention center. In 1977 the Del was named a National Historic Landmark. It survived. But survival had a price written into it, and the price was what it had to become. Here is the twist this episode has been walking toward. The Del survived where its rivals fell, and even in surviving it lost the thing Margaret Ellison had crossed the country for. Since 1958 it has been famous chiefly as the sun-drenched backdrop of some Like It Hot, Wilder, Monroe, Curtis, Lemon, playing a Victorian California hotel as a 1920s Florida resort. It became a landmark, a convention destination, a photograph. What the standardized room could never do, the Del in some measure still did. It remembered that a hotel could be the occasion and not merely the place you slept on the way to one. But the American plan, the long winter season, the dining room you changed your dress for at midday, the captain who knew your table across 14 days, those had already become history gallery photographs on a downstairs wall. The building was saved. The institution inside it was not the same institution. That is what the chain hotel formula could not carry and did not try to, not the ocean view, but the world the view was the setting for. And it is what the Civil Rights Act of 1964, with California's own Unruh Act already on the books since 1959, finally opened to everyone. In the same decade the thing itself was quietly ceasing to exist. If this channel is going to keep documenting what the American beach hotel was and what it meant to the people who shaped their year around it, subscribe. There are more lobbies, more dining rooms, more Saturday night dinner dances, more guests who pack 2 suitcases by category, and more families with the green book open to the beach hotel listings. The Del's dining room gave its guests an occasion that the standardized room was never designed to hold, and by the time the law had opened the doors to everyone, the occasion itself was already becoming a photograph. And if you have a hotel, a lobby, a dining room, a week, put it in the comments. Did your family cross the country by rail for a beach hotel season, and what did they dress for? Next time, the Roni Plaza, Miami Beach. Picture it. February 1922, the Crown Room under Baum's Crown chandeliers, a woman from Oak Park in the lighter dress she had kept folded since Kansas, finally at the table, finally known, at the far end of a week of rails and a mile of surf. That is what the wooden palace was for. That is what the standard room was not built to hold.